All right, back after the holiday break here, back on to Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. We are still in Volume 3, and we are reading Chapter 7 today. After a short period of rest, as the first rays of the sun came over the distant horizon, the Muni stood up and said, "With me are those who have learned many things which the Father sees for humanity. They see with the comprehension of that which penetrates spirit. Thus the whole wide world comes under their vision. They see that which humanity feels. Thus they are able to assist humanity in fulfilling its desires. They also hear thousands of sounds, usually inaudible, like the song of the hummingbird, the sounds made by the newly hatched robin, the notes of the field cricket, some of which sing at 15,000 vibrations a second, and many other musical sounds far above the range of the human ear. They are also able to feel, control, and send out inaudible sounds that are capable of producing types of emotional feelings such as love, peace, harmony, and perfection that benefit the whole world. The vibrations of the feelings of abundance and great joy can also be amplified and sent out by them so that they surround and interpenetrate all humanity to such an extent that, if you will, each unit of the human family may have them. When this condition is acknowledged to exist, each human unit cooperates by amplifying and sending out these vibrations. Then the very thing that humanity is in need of is crystallized into form around or among its units or people. Their desires are accomplished. When the necessary vibrations are set into activity, the units of humanity cannot escape the actual presence of these. In this way, all of humanity's perfect desires are crystallized into actual form. The vast sea of God's creative, unlimited, moving space is crystal clear, yet it is completely full of vibrating, emanating energy, and that emanating energy is known as aqueous substance, in which all substance or elements are in soluble form or suspended in harmonious relation, ready to respond to the call of the vibratory rate that will allow them to coalesce into form. When the proper vibratory influence is set up through the thoughts of the human unit, cooperating with the whole, the elements, having no other course, rush in and fill the mold set by the desire. This is absolute law, and none can stay its true course. Listen, an organ is playing in very low bass notes. Now let us first lower these notes so that they are no longer audible to us. The feeling or emotion of the sound we have experienced still lingers, does it not? The vibration is going on just the same, although it is inaudible. Now let us carry those notes up and up through the scale until they are so high that they are again inaudible. The feeling or emotion still lingers. The higher vibration is going on just the same. We know that neither of the influences ever ceases, although out of range of our physical ear. This is what we designate as spirit. When the physical loses control, spirit takes control, and that control is much more definite, as it has a much wider range of vibration than the mere physical, and is much more susceptible to the control of thought influences or vibrations, since thought is much closer allied to the coordinated with spirit. The physical is limited to the body and does not extend from or away from it. The physical is limited, too, entirely to the actions of the body, but not to its reactions. When it comes to body reactions, we are spirit, if we define it as spirit. Thus you can see how the physical body is limited. Spirit not only penetrates every atom of the so-called physical, it also interpenetrates the minutest part of all substance, whether it be solid or gaseous. In fact, it is the force in which the mold is wrought that substance takes its various patterns form. In no other way can substance take its various forms. Man is the only projector and coordinator of these various patterns that substance assumes. Allow me to digress for a brief moment of explanation. You see the great central sun of our universe blazing forth in all its magnificent splendor, and as the horizon gradually withdraws and exposes to our view a new day, a new epoch, a new Easter is born. This so-called universe of ours that rotates around that central sun is but one of 91 such universes that rotate around a central sun. This sun is 91,000 times larger than the whole or combined mass of all the 91 universes. This central sun is so colossal that each of the 91 universes rotating around it in perfect order and sequence is as small in comparison as the minute particles that spin around the central sun or nucleus of an atom, as you call it. It takes this universe over 26,800 years to accomplish one turn of its orbit around the great central sun. It moves in exact order with one complete precession of Polaris, or the North Star. Do you doubt there is a great positive divine power controlling all? Let us return to our observations. Look closely. A picture is forming, and on the film is the white globular disk of the sun. A spot of red is forming on the white disk. Now look more closely, and you will see that a tiny point of pure white light has flashed out from the red disk. This is not a beam of light. It is a running point of pure light, the spark of life, emitted and included with that which is to be born. It is but a tiny point of light to you, yet it is huge to those who can view it at close range. How strange it seems to you. In a very short space of time, you will be looking through an instrument that assists your eye to see all these things. This will also reveal to humanity many more wonders. For millions of ages, the great central sun has drawn to itself the throbbing, pulsating, yet harmonious emanations of energy, which must give forth of itself or burst asunder. Observe that a great nebulous gaseous mass has burst forth from the sun. You have observed in pictures the birth of the planet Neptune, which is now a great mass of microcosmic particles or atoms that have been ejected from the parent sun with great force and power. While it is nebulous and indistinct, the point of light that appeared before the final expulsion took place in the central sun that has the power to attract to itself and hold together even the minutest particles as well as those of larger dimensions that have been given forth from the parent sun. Your first thought is that an explosion has taken place, and that particles of the sun have been shot into space. Stop a moment and observe what has really happened. Why do the particles and gases cling close together and form a definite circular pattern? It is because of the intelligent law back of and guiding it in perfect order and harmony. This is proof that it is no accident, but is in perfect order and sequence governed by law that never fails. This point of light or central nucleus is the central spark or sun, the Christ of humanity, around which all humanity revolves. This is determined spirit force. This law prevails throughout all units of humanity. The central spark is a point of pure white light, the Christ which penetrated the first cell. Then it expands, divides, and gives off that light to another cell, which is born of its division, but held together by a coexisting and cohesive force, which is called love. These particles are nourished and held together just as the mother holds and nourishes the child. It is in reality a child of the sun, which contains within itself the nucleus of central sun. That nucleus is the image and likeness of the parent that has just given it forth. As soon as it has come forth from the parent, this central sun has the same power to draw to itself, consolidate, and hold the vibrant emanating energy that surrounds it, and which is necessary for its life and growth. It does finally consolidate the most extended orbit of our universe. When Neptune first came forth, and the central sun began to draw energy to itself, mostly from its parent, the sun, the atom began to consolidate into its form. That is, it began to shape itself into the pattern that was projected for it before its birth. It occupied what is known as the cradle orbit, the orbit within the orbit, which Mercury occupies today. In this orbit, the child is able to draw its substance from the parent more successfully, as it is much nearer to the parent. As it drew substance from its parent, it began to consolidate into form. Instead of remaining mere gaseous vapors in the nebulous state, the chemical elements began to segregate and consolidate. The resultant solids from chemical action began to consolidate, and rock structure began to form under intense heat and pressure. As this semi-liquid substance became more consolidated, it began to cool on the surface, and a crust formed. This crust became heavier and more dense, both by the cooling process and by the assimilation of particles upon, and adding to them, the outside of the crust. When this crust became strong enough to hold the revolving mass together, This mass became the primary rock structure of the planet, with a semi-liquid molten mass at its center. Then, from the resultant gases and vapor, water began to appear as the product of the union of these gases. The nebula then became worthy of the name planet. It was now fast evolving toward a condition where it could sustain life, yet it must go on for eons of time, adding to its structure particle by particle from the outside. The continued cooling of the central mass brought it nearer and nearer to perfection, before its atmospheric, chemical conditions and surface were ready to bring forth life organisms and maintain those life organisms. At this junction, the parent sun began to give birth to another atom. As this expulsion was completed, Uranus was born. The extra force emitted with the expulsion threw Neptune out of its cradle or smaller orbit into a more extended one. It was compelled to take the orbit now occupied by Mercury, to make room in the cradle orbit for the newborn child, Uranus, in order that it might receive its nourishment from the parent until its nebulous structure became a planet. Again, conditions settle down and go well for a long period of time. Neptune, the first child, is growing up and coming nearer to the conditions where it can support life. In fact, amoebic forms are appearing in its clouded, brackish water or inland seas. Then another atom is ready to come forth, and Saturn is born. The extra force given out at the time of this expulsion sends Uranus out of the cradle orbit, and it also sends Neptune out of the orbit now occupied by the planet Venus. Neptune was now sufficiently cooled, and its surface developed to a stage where it was able to support life. It was upon this planet, as it occupied this orbit, that the conditions for the support and nourishment of human life, which Earth enjoys today, were brought to the stage where the human life element could attach itself to the select amoeba necessary for the support and manifestation of the human form. Thus came into existence the first human race, not the animal amoeba, but the human amoeba, the amoeba of selective type and character, with intelligence that could, and did, shorten the process of evolution. Upon this planet conditions were perfect the selective human development, and this development came on at a rapid pace. There were no lower animal organisms, thus animal life did not develop. The planet was occupied by superior human beings who rapidly developed into a perfect human race who were all able to supply and support themselves directly from cosmic or aqueous substance. Thus, they would have been termed gods upon this earth. Many of the legends and myths of today have their inception in and are built around this great people. They were exactly like the principle that brought them into existence. This race, through their ability to express beauty and perfection, began to surround themselves with perfect and beautiful conditions. In fact, they built the planet into a paradise of beauty and perfection. It was intended that this race should forever maintain this perfect condition, which they had accomplished by absolute control of all the elements. Thus, when they put forth a desire, it was fulfilled instantly. As time moved on, some began to evidence inactivity and selfishness in attempting to outdo their fellow man. This condition brought on divisions, and divisions brought on selfishness and greed, which caused dissensions. The time that should have been spent in creating for service and advancement was dissipated in strife and contention. Instead of holding closely to their source, they were differing and separating widely, until all but a few lost that which was high and noble. All but the few let go of their security and protection. This caused a vortex to gather around the planet. Instead of holding to the perfect patterns of the divine, whereby they could have accomplished a complete universe of divine attributes upon divine planets, they gave way to such an extent that when the next outburst occurred, it was so enormous that when the nebula was consolidated, the resulting planet was larger in mass than all of those which had previously come forth. Thus the great planet Jupiter came forth. The excess energy given out was so gigantic that it swept Saturn out of the cradle orbit into the orbit now occupied by Mercury. The outburst was so tremendous and the solar system so filled that great quantities of asteroids formed, arrayed and aligned themselves around Saturn. Being of a different polarity, they could not coalesce with Saturn. Thus, they were independent, and their only alternative was to align themselves around the planet of Saturn as bands of asteroids. As such, they are commonly called the rings of Saturn. Some of these asteroids are as large as planets. The force swept Neptune, the great and beautiful, out into the orbit now occupied by the Earth. All of its magnificence with its great inhabitants, saved a few, were swept away. Those who were preserved had never let go of their divine heritage, and they had so constituted their bodies that they could seek safety in the emanations of the spirit sphere, which is all around and interpenetrates the 91 universes now in existence. In this condition, they have been able to preserve their identity and knowledge and give it out so that it will never pass out of existence. It is through and by these ideals that we live today. We claim kinship with these great ones. They compose the root race of humanity. By them, the ideals of humanity have been preserved, and the Godhead of man has been maintained. Then followed many millions of eons of time needed for the nebula of Jupiter to take form as a planet. So enormous is its size that it has cooled but little, even today. Time again passes on with swift wings, and the sun is ready to give birth to the fifth nebula. And Mars, the blood-red planet, is brought into existence. As this expulsion is complete, we see the phenomenon happening in mighty Jupiter. A huge red spot has suddenly developed on her side, and she is expelling a great portion of herself. She has given birth to the satellite which is called a moon. There is such an excess of force set up as the two expulsions take place that the giant Jupiter is thrown out of the cradle orbit, and room is made for the planet Mars. As the giant Jupiter occupies its new orbit, the whirling nebulous form is in no way able to gather to itself the great mass of particles that were expelled at the time of its birth. These particles were so far flung that they came within the influence of Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Mars. But, being of a different polarity, they could not be assimilated by those planets. They became separate asteroids without planetary polarity. Thus, they cannot take their place as planets and rotate in order in unison around the central sun. Consequently, they fly into space as a vast swarm of meteors, with no rhythm of movement, speeding with fearful velocity, to collide with and embed themselves in the surface of other planets, or to be torn to pieces through the impact of collision. Also, in their mad rush through space, minute particles are carried away until they will gradually return to the aqueous mass, where they can be again taken up and assimilated by the great central sun, to be given off again as nebulae at the birth of other planets or atoms. Now comes the outburst that gives birth to the nebula that finally forms our Earth. Mars is thrown out of the cradle orbit, and our Earth takes its place. Thus, all the planets are sent into another orbit to give space for the new child. Then Venus is born. In like manner, the Earth and all other planets or atoms are thrown into ever-expanding orbits in order to make room in the cradle for the newborn planet or atom. Then Mercury is born, throwing the other planets or atoms into another widened orbit, making up the full complement of planets that are visible through astronomy today, 8 in all. There are really 9, as the cradle orbit is not occupied by Mercury. It is occupied by the last nebula or child, but that nebula has not consolidated into form so that it can be seen. It is there nevertheless, and its influence is felt. Thus the universe that our Earth is a part of contains 9 planets or atoms with their 9 orbits, which they follow in mathematical precision around the central sun or nucleus. You have been shown pictures of this creation as it came into being through orderly sequence. Something is happening to Neptune, the farthest removed planet from the sun, with the greatest orbit. It has reached maturity and also its limit in velocity. It has received its full light charge and is ready to come forth as a sun. It is going into decline as the new nebula begins to take form, and the sun is ready to give birth to the 10th nebula. Before this expulsion takes place, Neptune has reached its limiting velocity in its spin around the central sun. It flies into space and explodes, then returns again to the aqueous. There it can again be taken up by the central sun to add more energy to that sun in order to make more planets or atoms that may come forth. In the universe of which our Earth is a part, there can be but 9 planets or particles spinning around the central sun at one time. Thus, it is a constant round of birth, consolidation, then expansion, reaching the limiting velocity, flying off into space, exploding, disintegrating, then reassimilating by the sun in order to give forth new birth. Thus, the sun is reassembling from the aqueous, that which it sends out to again become aqueous. It is a continuous renewal through regeneration into new birth. Were it not for this process, the great central sun of the 91 universes, as well as the central suns of the different universes, would have been consumed long ago and would have returned to the infinite in which all substances exist. A wise intelligence that pervades all emanations in space calls the universes into form and starts them on their onward march. The sun or central nucleus never grows old nor dies. It accepts, absorbs, holds, and consolidates, then gives birth to the atom. Yet it never diminishes, as it is forever receiving and absorbing into itself that which it is giving out. Thus, regeneration and rebirth are going on all the time. Universes are being formed, expanding, and returning that which they have received. There is one round of progression from a low to a higher, then on to a higher attainment. The galaxy of 91 universes that our Earth and its galaxy of planets or atoms are one part of is but one galaxy in a still wider flung universe of 91 galaxies that revolve around a still greater central nucleus or sun that has a mass 91,000 times greater than the first galaxy mentioned. This condition goes on and repeats itself by 91, almost indefinitely. The whole making up the great and infinite cosmos, the galaxies that comprise the Milky Way as you call it. This cosmos is often called the atomic heat ray, the source of the sun's heat. This is not a cloud of stars in which your sun belongs. It is a nebula born or expelled from the great cosmic central sun or nucleus just mentioned. The sun, as you see it located in this nebula, is but a portion of the light rays from the sun. These particular rays are bent at an angle as they enter mass, then are reflected, until these bent and distorted rays make up the image of the sun and place it in a false position. These rays are reflected back so distinctly that you think you are actually looking at the sun. In like manner, many other planets or atoms are distorted by this phenomenon. Where there seem many, there are few in comparison, yet the total number of the actual is calculated in many millions. By looking at the picture closely, you will see that these nebulae, or their suns, are not disks, but globular and round, flattened at the poles, just as our Earth is flattened. In looking at them, you are only observing the great flattened polar area. The stupendous mass of the great cosmic sun exerts so profound an effect upon light rays that they are reflected completely around the cosmos. They are also definitely affected and reflected by coming in contact with the atomic or cosmic rays, and their particles are thrown out of place to such an extent that the thousands of images or planets and stars are reflected from one collection. Thus, thousands of planets and stars appear to me misplaced, and many more thousands of the images are again reflected. When we look through the universe, the images show both the sides, and we see the light that was released hundreds of millions of years before, which has made the complete round of the cosmos. Thus, we get two images instead of one. One image is of the planet as it was hundreds of thousands of years ago, while the other is as it was hundreds of millions of years ago. This follows through the whole great cosmic order. In many instances, we are actually looking at the great past, and we can also see into the future by the same means. There is an invisible connection, like the thought or heart impulse, amplified billions of cycles through which spiritual orders go forth, that controls all of the universes. These great throbbing impulses, or heart throbs, go out through the intelligence which pervades the aqueous that surrounds the cosmos, which is its spiritual counterpart. It is these gigantic heart throbs that send the life currents into every atom of the complete cosmos, and keep them moving in perfect order and rhythm. In this infinite cosmos vastness, there can be no sick or discordant cells, as one sick or discordant cell would throw out all of unison. Then, for a time, chaos would result. This also pertains to the human organism when disturbed by discordant thought. It was from this central control that the term Godhead was evolved. The heartbeat of the human unit corresponds to this heartthrob, although in miniature. Man is from and is a counterpart of the intelligence which has control of the whole aqueous source. He is coexistent with the source and draws all direct from the great aqueous reservoir, just as the great central sun draws from that source, but in greater degree because of his union with the greater intelligence which is directing the source. Man, the unit of humanity, is a well-organized divine universe, though infinitesimal compared with the great whole of the universes. Yet man, as the unit of humanity, when he assumes and takes actual charge of his divinity, is most necessary, and he is of the great intelligence that is before and in control of the whole divine plan of all the universes. Thus should all the universes be destroyed. Man, in complete cooperation with primal intelligence, which interpenetrates and pervades all emanations in the aqueous as well as down to the lowliest physical forms, starting with light emanation, could rebuild all the universes. Should such a catastrophe occur, man not only has the power, but is the power that does resolve himself back into primal intelligence, wherein there is no destruction. When quiet again reigns and harmony is restored, it matters not to man, when he is back into primal intelligence, how many billions of ages pass to bring about primal perfection in order that the whole process may be started over again. Here man maintains oneness with the infinity and can afford to wait until the time is ripe for the bringing forth of the universes. Then, with the preserved consciousness of former experiences, he is better equipped to assist in the bringing forth of a more perfect and lasting condition. In this, man can never fail, as he is more definite than any form, and failure is not written in his horizon or in his consciousness. The infinitesimal becomes the infinite of all forms. When the wise sage says, "I am deathless, ageless, eternal," there is not a thing in life or light that I am not. He is looking into and sees this vista. This is true divinity. The ascension is truly his.